Hello dear students, now the exams are very close and we know that we should be giving mock test papers, but I have seen many students who do give the mock test papers also but they do not clear the exam, versus I've seen many students who do not touch the mock test papers and they still clear the exam. So is it a deciding factor? Is it sufficient to give the mocks? Well, see, there are some mistakes that students do when they give the mocks that you should be avoiding to get the best result. What are those mistakes? We are going to be discussing that in this video. Do watch the video till the end so you know that you are not doing any of those mistakes and you're making the most of the mock test papers or the past exam papers that you are solving. First of all, where should you be actually solving these mocks from? Now, there are plenty of popular websites which provide this facility of mock test papers that you can solve at home. You can give it to them back and they can check it for you and they'll give you the marks. Now, from my experience with my mentees, I have realized that for some of the popular sites, there are some discrepancies. That means, first of all, the paper pattern is not exactly the same as the kind of paper that comes from the side of the institute in our exam. So you have to be very careful when you're selecting these websites. Check that the paper pattern is actually of the same standard as that of the institute that comes in the exam. If the questions are coming very easy or they are conceptual, not case study based, then there is no point of giving these mocks because the level is not as per our standard. Second discrepancy I have found is that we don't exactly know who is checking this paper. That means sometimes it is actually CA inter students or CA final students or CS executive students who are checking these papers. Now, the checking is not according to our standard. In our exam, the checking is really strict. You get 4 out of 4 marks only when you have written absolutely everything accurately. If your presentation is not right, sections you have not written, assumption, working note if you have not written, you lose the marks. But that is not sometimes followed in the paper checking of these popular websites. Now, the side effect is that you get more marks compared to what you deserve when you're giving these mocks. The marks are escalated. If the person is supposed to get less marks but they get more marks, they are confident, they are relaxed, they don't work hard according to as much as they should be working hard, and then that has an impact on the exam. So be very careful when you're going for these paid mock test papers. Their standard has to be good enough, their checking has to be good enough, otherwise it's of no use. Okay, so rather what you can do is you can just solve the mock test papers or the past exam papers that are available on the institute's portal. They have suggested answers also that they have given there. So you can just download any of those papers, sit by yourself and solve those papers and then do the checking yourself. There are going to be plenty of benefits that will come out of it. First of all, you will save time. That means you won't have to wait for 3-4 days to get the result, how many marks you have gotten. Secondly, you will yourself check the paper, so you will thoroughly understand the paper pattern also. You'll understand where you're making mistakes and you'll immediately get to know if there are silly mistakes, presentation errors, working note errors, etc. The next mistake that I see a lot of students commit is that they haven't completed 80 to 90% of their syllabus and they start giving full length mocks. Now see, we all know we have to do mock test paper. We should have some sort of exam practice before we go in the exam. But it's not just for the sake of giving mocks that you should be giving mocks. It's so important that you first complete the syllabus, have some sort of revision, and then you give the mocks. That way at least you will be able to actually assess your performance, whether you're up to par or not, what are the areas you need to improve. If you're not even prepared and you're giving the mocks, that is not even a real evaluation of your preparation because you haven't even prepared well. So what happens then is we get less marks because we are not prepared, because we couldn't attempt the paper, we feel the paper is really tough, we get less marks and our mindset is affected, we feel discouraged, depressed, and then we don't even feel like studying. Give priority to revision and then after that you sit for full length mocks. If let's say you only completed 50% of the syllabus, then you give 50% mocks. If you want certain chapters that you want to strengthen, then do past exam questions from that chapter. Do a scanner. Another mistake that I see a lot of students doing when they're solving the mocks is that they really fixate their attention to the marks that they're getting. You don't have to attach yourself to any of these marks. These marks don't matter at all. These are just practice marks. What we need to be focusing on here is exactly where did we make the mistakes and what can we improve. So there are certain things you should be analyzing. First of all, was your speed good enough? Were you able to complete the maximum amount of paper? If not, improve your speed. Secondly, you have to see your presentation. Was your presentation as per the standard of the institute? If not, check what is the required presentation and improvise. Third, are there any weak chapters? There might be certain chapters that you have studied but you're not able to solve the questions. So then that is a chapter which you need to relearn, you need to recall. If it is a theory chapter, then you have to read it, then try to recall it. Use the active recall technique so that you're able to remember those provisions. If you're not able to understand the questions correctly, you're writing something else, then you need to learn how to read the questions. You have to be more aware and careful. If you're making silly mistakes, you have to be aware while writing the paper. If you're not writing the working notes, not writing the assumptions, you have to be careful on those areas. You can't just fixate yourself to the marks. Marks are irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. What really matters is how you have performed and where are the mistakes you can improvise on. By the way, is solving mock necessary to pass the exam? Well, the answer is no. See, I have seen many students who have solved mock test papers and they have not yet been able to clear the exam, versus I've seen many students who have not really written the mocks in 3-hour period in exam-like conditions, but they have cleared the exam. So exactly writing the mocks is not compulsory. So I'll tell you what those students do who do not give the mocks. These people, they also see the suggested answers, past exam papers, revision test papers, or the mock papers that are issued by the institute. They do check them, but they don't really sit in 3-hour period and give these mocks. What they exactly do is they just download these papers, they see these papers, solve every single question, read the question without looking at the answer, they solve those questions and then verify that answer with the answer which is given in the suggested answers. Okay, so they do these mocks in rough. Instead of sitting for 3 hours and solving one paper, they give 1.5 hours and solve an entire paper in rough and also do the analysis, and they check wherever they are making the mistakes and they improvise on it. So it's the same thing. Whether you spend 3 hours in giving the mocks or whether you spend 1.5 hours and roughly solve the mocks, it's absolutely okay. What's more important is that when you are solving these mocks in rough or in full, you make sure that you're learning from it. Another thing that you should not be doing when you're solving past exam papers or writing the mocks is that simply go through the answers. Please don't do that. It's of no use. That means orally just auditing all the answers will not help. What you need to be doing is read the question, understand it, use your own brain, don't look at the answer, solve it yourself and then verify the answer. See, when you're practicing mock papers, it's important to exercise your own mind. Then you will be able to identify where you are lacking. The next thing that you should be doing when you're solving mocks is that please write down your mistakes. When you will be solving the questions, you will be making some mistakes. We all do, right? Silly mistakes, working notes or assumptions, section, whatever the mistake is, please make a note of it. Write it down properly, put a lot of stars, and those mistakes is something that you have to recall again. So the next time you will be revising, please see all of those mistakes also so that you remember those mistakes and you do not commit them in the exam. Another thing that you can do is that for all the exam papers that you are solving or the mocks that you are solving, make a note of every single concept that you have solved in these question papers in the main book that you're studying from. So let's say you're doing one question paper, you read question number 1. Now question number 1 is coming from chapter number 2 of the subject. So in your main book from which you're studying, could be study material or some reference book, make a note of that particular topic. Mark that particular topic as important. It came in this particular exam. So that way you won't have to do these question and answers again. And from that main book itself, every time there is a concept that was covered in these question papers, you will automatically identify it and pay more attention to it. Next important tip is that please do analyze the last 4 attempts past exam papers to know which question has which chapter covered. So generally speaking, question number 1 has a specific chapter which is covered. Question 2 comes from a specific chapter. 3 comes from a specific chapter. So you should know that kind of pattern. And knowing that pattern has a huge advantage because in the exam, you will already know that that particular question is coming from this chapter or from that chapter. So if suppose you have this chapter 6 which you have prepared really nicely, you can directly jump onto that particular question. See, in the exam, you have to attempt the strongest and the questions that you know the best the first, so that you have a really good impression on the examiner who's checking your paper. So accordingly, the selection of the question is very, very important, and for the selection of the question, you should know the paper pattern. Now I know it's your last revision going on, so in the last revision there are certain important things that you should be remembering. Now I have put all of those in this particular video. Make sure you check this video next. I'll see you again. Bye.